We'll wing it. It'll be
Yeah.
fine.
Yep. Okay.
Written down.
So I'll do these 3 questions. What did you do?
Stats.
And how does it relate to your organisation?
Yeah, that would be great, yeah.
And
You've
then
got some early slides, why don't you talk about
Yeah.
that during that?
Yeah, and then pass it over to you about how did you approach environmental sustainability in your design, and then okay, we'll just, and then we can just then this was a question, how did you balance considerations of heritage, aesthetic, affordability, yeah, we didn't care about heritage. We left a little reference. That's a bit of brickwork.
We've sort of
Sorting
put in
through.
an aspect, haven't we? So that if anybody ever wanted to peel it away again and find out what it was like in 2000, whatever, 12,
Yeah,
they could
and
find
I'll
it
just
behind that.
copied the lettering, colour,
It's always strange when you've been live streamed and stuff.
sensitivity.
Do you now? I can't see how much it's
Will you
There was
take
lots
this
of
question?
photographs being streamed on Twitter this morning. Never some takes a photograph and presenting it, which
I'll do my best, yeah.
Seeing
never a
the,
beautiful photograph.
is something we need to...
best not to.
You guys good to go?
Yeah?
Okay, good afternoon everybody and welcome back. For those of you who weren't there this morning, I'm Simon Brammer. I work for Ashton Awards, but I'm also one of the co-founders of the Fit for Future network. This afternoon's workshops are meant to give you more opportunity to get into some of the detail of some amazing projects and more opportunity to ask questions and have them answered. So I'm going to ask our panellists this afternoon to be relatively brief in terms of their presentations. I'm going to be quite a strict taskmaster in terms of timings because I think you guys will have lots of questions that you'll want to ask. Before we get going, there are a number of things I've been asked to remind you of. So, as Alison said this morning, the event is being live streamed and also signed. So if our speakers could speak relatively clearly and not too quickly, please, that would be appreciated. And the same for our audience. If you have questions, we have a roving mic, and we'd really appreciate you waiting for that microphone to come to you. And again, speaking slowly so that our live signers can keep up. That would be much appreciated. We are going to be finished by 3 o'clock for a coffee break. I was asked to apologise slightly about the temperatures in here this morning. Hopefully they're a bit more tolerable this afternoon, so I'm sorry about that, but hopefully it is a little bit cooler. Just to say, if you do need to go and get yourself a drink at some point and you are too hot, please do feel to leave the room. If you need to go to the loo or get a drink of water, we won't be offended at all. That's absolutely fine. I'm not going to say very much more other than to introduce the title to you. There are some really amazing projects here. So the remit of this afternoon is to hear from cultural organisations who've successfully implemented projects to make their buildings more sustainable, and to learn from their vision and experience in terms of translating those ideas into practice. And I'm sure based on this morning's session, there will be many questions for those presentations. So we have with us today Anna and Sarah from Space, who are over on my right-hand side, and Britannia and Emma from Sadler's Wells. What I'm going to ask you to do just before we get going, just to introduce yourself, just kind of a minute, just explaining who you are and what you do, please.
Sarah's actually our architect. She's not from Space. She's Sarah Wigglesworth Architect, so very delighted she could join me.
Thank you, Anna. Shall I just say a little bit about me then? So I'm director of practice in North London, and we've sort of been trying to blaze a trail through what sustainability might mean for all kinds of buildings, mainly in the public sector, arts, education, and some housing projects as well. And Anna approached us in, 2012, I guess, something like that, wasn't it?
Yes,
to help her on her project.
Okay.
Over to you then. Do you want to say
Just a
something
quick
about
intro.
Please, just a quickie, that would be great.
I'm the Chief Executive at Space and have been for 11 years, and Space is an arts and educational charity with its HQ in Hackney, And we're an arts and advocacy body providing space resources and support for artists to make great art and for communities local to our building to engage in that creativity.
Great. Would you like to just introduce yourselves?
Yeah, sure. My name is Emma Wilson. I'm the Director of Technical and Production at Sadler's Wells, which means theoretically I should be doing shows, but actually Britannia makes me do sustainability and safety and things like this. So I've got the privilege of being of working on sustainability very closely in our building, and also a lot of the projects that we have been doing the last 2 or 3 years. It's what we're going to talk about directly affect me and my teams. It's all the technical facilities and the building services facilities as well. So with both hats on, I've been very closely involved in all of these in the renovations and refurbishments that we've done.
Britannia, the COO, would you like to say a few words about your role?
Yeah, so a lot of the sort of building infrastructure teams come under my remit, but also I think my role really is to try and get the money to deliver on these building projects. So I'm sort of charged with finding the resources to do great things.
Great. So we're going to start off with Anna and Sarah. So from Space, and my apologies, from Wigglesworth Architects, is that right?
That's right, yeah.
Great. And you're going to be focusing on a case study based on Deborah House. So
That's right.
I'm going to give you 10 minutes, and after that 10 minutes, I'll encourage you to wind up. But the floor's all yours.
Do you want to say anything about this? Okay. Before and after.
Yeah.
Okay. I hope I can figure this thing out. Sorry, I'm just trying to
Back the
get
other way.
the hang of your...
Put it towards you. That's it.
Well, okay, so we have 18 different sites providing studios for over 750 artists. So the first question I was presented with, what did you do and how was environmental sustainability included in your capital project? To say that actually we were carrying out 4 projects pretty much simultaneously on 4 different sites. And this is one of them. So we chose to talk we were asked to talk just about Deborah House, but we were working on that with 1.36 million of capital from Arts Council capital spread over 4 sites. So I'm going to show you a little bit more. So the drivers for our programme of capital upgrades is really from staff and trustees wanting to support our artist tenants better, and particularly in this context they'd suffered from years from substandard accommodation. And you know, we've been around since 1968, and going back to maybe the late 60s, early 70s, people put up with no heating and drafty buildings, but in this day and age, especially as rents go up, we had to sort out some problems that we couldn't live with, and we've had very under-resourced buildings for a very long time, and so this was an opportunity to address some of those challenges. I'm just going to show you, so that's kind of what we do. Studios, artist development, and exhibitions and engagement projects. And so these are some of our other sites that we were supported from Arts Council to develop. Martello, Haymar. I'm not going to tell you much more. We also bought a new freehold during this time scale. So just to give you a bit more info. So that's what some of them look like inside. I think that's my last slide, is it? Oh, no, and then some of our public programmes commissioned by Ivan Argot and Florence Peake. So just to say, so our aim was to future-proof our old industrial buildings, and we wanted to address structural and design issues. So going on, do you want to talk to that, and then I'll discuss what we wanted to achieve?
Sure. Can we get a full screen view of that? I don't know if anyone in the technical booth can do that. Okay, maybe not. Okay. Well,
shall I say why we appointed you? Maybe?
Yeah, that would be very good.
Fine. Okay. So this building had a roof that leaked like a sieve. We'd leased it since the mid-80s, but we'd only managed to buy the freehold in 2010. And this gave us an opportunity to sort out these inherent problems. So inherent design flaws with the roof guttering, it couldn't cope with rain volume, perished brickwork, large crittle windows, which grow loads of light, but it made it impossible to heat the building in winter, no roof insulation. And so we were specifically looking for an architect who we felt completely was sympathetic to the environmental challenges and also sympathetic to artists. So after interviewing a range of practices, lo and behold, we chose Sarah Wigglesworth. Right, so.
Thank you. Okay, so does this laser work? No. Okay, well, what you're looking at here...
Projector's there.
What?
If you put
it's
the
the
projector.
I don't know, you were looking to use the laser, but I don't think it works.
Doesn't matter. Okay. What you're looking at here is a view of central Hackney, Mare Street there, and the town hall to your left, and the fashion hub is the very big grey building right in the centre of the screen, and Deborah House sits just to the east of that. This is part of a sort of an area in North London where the kind of pressure on development has become quite intense. But it's very well connected now, and in fact the value of the building and its sort of increased value actually plays a really interesting part in unlocking this project. So just, zooming in a bit closer, you can see Deborah House there marked in red, and essentially it was a former garment factory which Space had acquired. It was one of the few projects I think you actually owned, isn't it, Anna?
We own three freeholds now.
yeah.
But that's our sustainability strategy, is to buy freeholds.
It's surrounded mainly by housing, and this is a sort of leftover bit of former Hackney, which used to be workplaces. It's basically a 4-square big building, but its south-facing elevation is one of the kind of key aspects to this, whereas its north-facing elevation virtually has no windows in it at all. So the plan of the building reflects that, and one of the issues for us was how to kind of mitigate the enormous amount of potential overheating that could come from the building facing south. So this is the west facade of Deborah House before we converted it. And you can see that actually it suffers from various problems. The key one was the roof, and Anna came to us saying, the roof's leaking. I can't ask my artist to spend any longer in these terrible conditions, and we need to do something about it. But looking at the fabric, it was in a very poor state of repair. The windows were falling apart and were leaky. There were security issues at ground floor level, which you can see how people have solved in this image here. The brickwork was a very, very soft red brick, which had been repaired a number of times. The roof, as I said, was leaking, and these photographs were actually taken when all of the booths that the artists work in had been already taken out. But you can see the valley gutter, multiple valley gutters,
Not
single
booths,
glazing.
no. Sorry, they're actually rooms.
They
not
were
booths. Yeah,
sorry. Rooms, yeah. Can I go on? Oh, there we are, yeah. And you can see the valley gutters and the roof that was leaking at that point. And what we eventually suggested to Anna was that actually we might put another floor on this building, and through that replace the roof, but also provide additional accommodation for artists and therefore secure their income going forward in the future. And the other thing was to improve the thermal performance of the outside of the building by recladding it and insulating it in order that we could save money on the electricity and heating bills. And through doing that, we would preserve the fabric of the building, look after it for the future, and if anybody ever wanted to peel it away again, they could go back to the state it was in when they first found it. But at the same time, it would give the whole place a facelift and a kind of new identity in the kind of in Hackney. So that's the east facade, which actually has the main entrance in it. That's the thing at the far right over there. And you can see some of the repairs made to the brickwork before we took it over.
Can I just butt in that our other challenge with the building was access? So it was environmental improvements and access improvements. I know that's not the nature of this focused talk, but I thought you should know.
Okay, so that gives you some idea of what was going on with the brickwork, and what was happening was water was getting in behind that render and making the situation even worse. So we felt that repairing the brickwork wasn't going to do it for us, and it in any case would be fantastic if we could make the insulative value of the envelope much better. So some views of the outside. That's the quite beautiful lettering which announces the building to the street. Some more images of what it was like from the inside with the windows, and some of the water ingress that is coming in at the head of the windows as part of the problem. So our work, as I said, has gone across a whole range of different project areas, but our key interest is in sustainability, and what that means and how it relates to each individual project varies very much depending on what the client wants, what their capability and technical prowess is, what they can afford to put in, and what will sort of assist their business plan and their sort of unique selling point in terms of organisation. So we've worked a lot with all kinds of different users, and there is no sort of one size that fits all for everybody. And what the challenge of this project was, it was a very, very large building and quite a restrained budget, and how do you make that budget go as far as possible in order to try and improve the fabric of the building?
Can I just say we're used to working on really tight budgets because our priority is to keep our premises as affordable as possible for artists. So this is a luxury for us, actually, employing an architect. We usually just do the stuff in-house. So it was fantastic to have some innovative materials and approaches.
So, I mean, one of the previous projects that we had carried out a little bit earlier, finished in 2006, was this one by the Siobhan Davies Studios in Southwark. And there again, we had an existing building where we removed the roof and we replaced the roof with a completely modern extension. In this case, it was a dance studio, but we were also looking at ways in which we could improve the existing fabric of the building and bring it up nearer to building regulation standards. Actually, buildings like this still don't quite meet them, and there are kind of heritage dispensations as a result of that, but what you're trying to do is kind of keep the building lasting better for the foreseeable future. So we were looking...
10 minutes there, so you've got a couple more minutes.
Okay, so we were looking at what the heat loss from various areas in the building was, and where the sun path was, and what was going to take the brunt of the problems with the environment around it, and where we could make the most improvements. And so the end solution was this, a recladding job around the existing building, replacing windows and insulating the walls, adding the rooftop extension, which has a Sedum roof, and repairing the roof in that manner.
And the long-term benefit for us, the outcomes, were reducing our ongoing maintenance costs by putting in new windows, which we don't have to redecorate, so we're saving 70 grand every 5 years on redecks. Low energy lighting throughout. I mean, those are small but really important changes beyond the design. Lifespan of the windows, 60 years. Yeah. Roof insulation has made a massive difference to heat retention, and the external cladding, which is it's all about the envelope.
Yeah, so that's just a recap of what we did. So it's essentially that's the plan of the ground floor before we took it over, and essentially what we're doing is disabled accessibility, better cycle parking, disabled toilets, improving the social spaces and the washrooms and all the sort of ancillary spaces around the building, and adding this new rooftop extension with the new potential for artists to inhabit that with staircases and all the means of escape sorted out, and then the grass roof on top of that, and actually the opportunity to get roof lights in so that you get better daylight and better quality facilities for the artists. And then there was this issue about, so these sections and elevations show you the solution that we came up with and how we dealt with fitting the windows and the insulation to the existing structure. And actually, there was a sort of big issue around this with planning, because we were quite interested in how we dealt with security in this building and how we dealt with the potential solar gain on the south facade. And actually, I can't seem to advance this slide. I don't really know why not. Oh, okay. So one solution that we'd used in a previous project you see here is to cover the windows with the cladding in order that you could still get light in, but it would actually save the windows from vandalism. And we suggested that to the planners, and it would also stop the building overheating in there, but the planners didn't like that. So we ended up doing that, which was just not cladding all the windows. And yeah, so it just became a facade where the windows were treated pretty much the same everywhere. Leaving
It's a heat management problem.
Yes, exactly. But also leaving some areas of brickwork so that the old building appears behind this kind of new curtain of cladding. So the memory of the former building still exists in small areas around it. And you can see how we did that there. And adding the roof extension kind of chose a colour which was quite similar to the rest of the brickwork.
Do you want a bit of practical costs?
I'm going to pause you there, but
facts?
perhaps we can answer some of those questions as we go. So some of the practical costs would be very interesting, but could we do that as part of the question?
Yeah, of course. So you're just seeing some of the interiors now of the new building. Now it's finished. And the cake, which was the celebration of its opening. Which is
Designed by a fantastic
building.
young artist.
I think a round of applause is in order. Thank you very much, both of you. So I have lots of questions, and I'm sure you do too. I'm going to encourage you to write them down or remember them, because I would like us to do both the presentations first, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers after. So thank you much, Sarah and Anna. I'm going to hand over now to Emma and Britannia to talk about Sadler's Wells.
Yes, so I'm Britannia from Sadler's Wells, and we began a repairs and refurbishment project at Sadler's Wells in Islington in the autumn of 2013, and we completed the project in 2015. And this was a £7.2 million project with 4.9 million coming from the Arts Council. And so the reason we had to do this was that, you know, the Sadler's Wells building had been in constant operation for 15 years at that point, and we were getting some critical failures, particularly in the power flying system, which had meant that some performances were interrupted, and obviously that's just completely unacceptable. But there were other issues around the building, and there were other opportunities to do things more sustainably and better. So that's what we were trying to do. And so in order to do those works, most of them were completed while the building was in operation, but we did have a 6-week closure in 2014 and a 4-week closure in 2015. And there were, in terms of our application to the Arts Council and the key things that we wanted to achieve, much of it was around energy, and so an awful lot of lighting was replaced with LED fittings and so on. Emma will talk a bit more about some of those. We also had a great deal of heat loss from the main entrance to Sadler's Wells. If you remember, there was a big sliding door at the front, which was, because people walked past, was open the vast majority of the time, meaning that the ground floor foyer was always freezing. And our staff in the ticket office were, you know, in the winter wearing their gloves and everything, which wasn't ideal. So we did something with the entrance to put in more doors, basically, a more traditional form, but that's saved an awful lot on energy. And we also did something similar at our stage door, which had the same issues with heat loss. And we put in some photovoltaic cells on the roof to help with energy generation. And in terms of technical systems, we looked at the power flying system, and we'll talk a bit more about what we needed to do there. And we also replaced things like dimmers, and we bought some new production lighting desks, things like that. In terms of audience development, we replaced our ticketing system with a new CRM system that integrated fundraising so that all of the customer data is in one place. That's important. We did a lot of upgrading to other IT systems, so we were all working with computers that were more than 8 years old, and printers that in some were original from the rebuilding 15 years ago. So we've replaced all of those and a lot of the servers and things. And obviously when you do that, you replace them with much more energy efficient units that you can buy nowadays. And then in terms of building fabric, we refurbished all the auditorium seating, carpets, things like that were in need of repair. We did quite a lot of work in dressing rooms, and again, lots of energy efficient lighting put in there. And indeed, the exterior, the fly tower signage, the sort of saddler's wells at the top of the building, that was all replaced with something more energy efficient. We also had an access audit and looked at different ways we can improve access in the building. And that was the particular thing there was about the drop curbs on the pavements outside the Sadler's Wells site. And then we also did a lot of plant replacement, things like air handling units and what have you, those sorts of things. So, Emma.
So a bit more detail. The building opened in 1998 and it was energy efficient at the time. So we didn't anticipate being able to make a huge difference and make huge changes, but we knew that whatever we had to change, because technically we had to change some things, we would have a sustainable element to it. If I just talk through some of the things that we did and why we did them. This is the house, as you see from the stage. The house light system was completely replaced. We had 27 different kinds of tungsten light bulb out there, some of which you could no longer buy, and we were getting them off eBay. It also meant there was a lot of working at height. There was a lot of staff doing lamp replacements. Now it's an entirely LED system, which is wonderful. It's cut down on maintenance work. It also means that there's vastly reduced working at height, because we need to look at well-being and training of staff all the time. It also means there's no heat sink in the auditorium, so we're not getting the generation of heat in the auditorium, and we found that it was moving gently to the stage and then it was going up into the fly tower, because of when you have a full house of 1,500 people, that generates a lot of heat. And that has improved things like haze and smoke effects on the stage. So we've had this sort of secondary positive effect by literally not generating all of that heat from the thousands of, about 400 light bulbs. This is some of the works going on. These I'll talk through as we go through. This is the cafe. We replaced a lot of the air handling, a lot of the ducting, a lot of the ventilation work around the building to make it more efficient. I think I'm going forward. This is the auditorium once it was stripped out. This enabled us to not only do the carpets and the seating, but also to rip out all the lighting at the same time. The logistics with all the different teams working together was quite formidable, really. No, it doesn't seem to be working. I'll leave it there. I'll talk instead. We looked at backstage lighting. There's a lot of studios, a lot of corridors, a lot of dressing rooms, and all of that has gone to more energy efficient lighting. The foyer, again, went to complete LED lighting. It's a 4-level foyer with a sort of atrium area inside as well. That's completely LED, as are our external and our banner signings. The power flying, which Britannia mentioned, is instead of some of you may know, some of you may not, but when you have flying systems in theatres, usually it's ropes, and now more latterly we're getting mechanised systems, so they're computer controlled by fly staff.
Well, the power fly is a person moving. I imagined it was some kind of energy system in
there.
No,
it means we have 85 bars over the stage, and that means that they fly in and out with scenery and lights on them. And so when you have a large theatre, it's double height so that the scenery can disappear up into the tower, which is why you have a large tower on a theatre as you drive past. That's all motors and computer controlled. Now the drives for those were no longer manufactured. They had to bespoke make them in Germany. It took 6 weeks every time to make them. They're horrendously expensive, so it was beginning to fall over. And one of the reasons was all of the heat in the fly tower, because all of the old technology was just generating too much heat. So we replaced all of the drives, and that was a large chunk of the money that we used, 1.4 million. And it was a substantial project, but we wanted to get rid of both noise and heat generation from all of those computer drives. And if you imagine about 18 bedroom cabinets, that's how much space it takes up on either side of the stage, up in fly tower. We have a system in there of cooling plates. So it's almost like cold radiators. They're fed from cooling tanks on the roof. They come into the building, and all of the components are mounted on cold plates. So the heat generation doesn't even make it to a fan to get blasted out into the air. It gets cooled at source, which has made a huge difference as well, and chilled the building down. So we're not fighting against heat production all the time. Stage lighting, all of this lighting you see overhead. There's a push now in the industry for us to be more energy efficient and to use LED fixtures, and designers are coming on board with that as well, and taking part in the development of those kind of stage luminaires. It doesn't have the same kind of quality of light, so manufacturers are working very hard to satisfy the needs of designers and the needs of the demands of buildings that want to be more energy efficient. We're investing in that as we go along to try and be at the forefront of that technology. Our wardrobe department has new energy efficient washing machines and dryers. They get through a huge amount of laundry every day. There's about 3 of each of those machines churning over, sometimes up to 12 hours a day. The lobbies, Britannia referred to, the stage and the main entrance doors have got a double system of doors, so you have a lobby in between, so you're not losing all the heat when that single skin of doors opens anymore. Computers and screens and TV monitors around the building now will switch off automatically. They've got all sorts of energy-saving components in them, and the computers, the IT team calculated that we save 50 to 70% of energy from switching from old to new based on the manufacturer's data. We've got a building management system which is much more sensitive and metering around the building so that we know which room is using energy, and we can start to tweak it in the mornings and work out who left the lights on in which room, and really it's marginal gains, but they add up. And plant, chiller units, air handling units, ventilation boilers, which we've touched on, these are all upgraded as well. And finally, photovoltaic cells onto the roof of the main auditorium. So we're generating electricity. They went online in 2015. So just to wrap up, Julie's Bicycle monitored us and did an evaluation report which was published in May 16 this year. And bearing in mind we were quite an energy efficient building to start with, we're very pleased that we've dropped the electricity use by 17%. And the CO2 emissions are down by 12.75%, which was a very positive gain for us.
Very impressive indeed. Thank you both very much.
So, 2 very different scale-size projects, very different approaches. Do people have instantaneous questions they want to either ask Sarah or Anna, talking about Deborah's house particularly? Or Britannia and Emma, Anna and Sarah. Any particular questions you would like to ask? If you do, could you put your hand up please, and can you remind you that we're being live streamed? So if you could just say your name and your organisation before you ask your question, that'd be much appreciated.
Hi, I'm Val Drayton from the John Hansard Gallery in Southampton. I'm interested, Anna, to know about how you work with your artists in the building to take them with you on the journey with this building, because I'm imagining that there's a lot of different points of view on the process.
So the artists had suffered for years. It was so bad that they literally couldn't work there for several months during the winter. So, you know, it was in a terrible state. We just don't have access to funds to do those kind of repairs. They were incredibly appreciative. We actually worked with the artists closely because we couldn't afford the loss of rental income by moving them out. So we actually did the building work with the artists on site. Obviously, because we put an extra floor on top, we had to take the second floor of artists' decant for the duration. So we had a pressure to turn the project around as quickly as we could. It was challenging for the artists working on site, but having taken visitors around last week, they say that was nothing compared to the benefit afterwards. So, yeah, they're patient, tolerant, and they're reaping huge rewards.
And it sounds like some good communication from you too in terms of making that
We
happen.
communicate with our tenants all the time. We have meetings and show them the plans and get their input, and you know they work there all the time, so they understand the security challenges, the overlooking challenges. Yeah, so they're crucial advisors in making a success of the refurb.
Thank you. Any more questions? Can I ask a question? I'll come back to you in a moment. Chair's privilege. I'll be right back to you, I promise. I was just going to ask a question just in terms of the work that you've been doing at Sadler's Wells. One of the challenges, certainly in the Fit for Future network, we get is about making those capital investments in the first place. I understand some of your money came from the Arts Council, but how do you persuade your senior managers and your board that it's an investment worth making?
Well, to be honest, I mean, in a way, we were helped by the fact that we did have a couple of performances that were interrupted.
Right.
So, you know, once that starts to happen, you quickly get everybody on
So
board.
you're suggesting if they pull the plug in the middle of the performance, it might kind of work in terms of...
No, I mean, we did have a couple of really nasty situations.
Yeah, we never lost a show, but the Power Flying, which was the first fully power flying house in the country. The Opera House was after us, and then there've been subsequent ones like the Curve in Leicester. The technology for that was a bit like, I equated it in a board meeting, didn't I, to using an old laptop, and if you start up one piece of video, you're fine. If you start up a second piece of video, everything freezes. But if you get a new MacBook, it's lovely, you can run 3 things simultaneously and jump between them. And that's what our system was like. It was 1998. It was the oldest in the country, so it couldn't cope with the programming demands of new shows. And we were starting to get a lot of new shows coming in with much more complex moves, partly because the West End has generated that kind of technology, automation it's called, and partly because there are other countries like Holland has gone completely over to power flying to reduce manual handling injuries and early retirement from staff because of manual labour to pull ropes, which is how it used to be done. So we're getting a lot more shows coming in with much more complex needs. And we couldn't serve them, and we knew that we were not future-proof.
Similarly from space, it's really embarrassing having tenants who may be showing in the Turner Prize, Hayward, Serpentine, all these galleries, whose work is at risk of leaks and who are too cold to work. And so there's a lot more we should be doing if we had the resources. It's a sort of tip of the iceberg, really.
So there's some interesting stuff there about kind of building a business case. It's not just about being environmentally responsible, it's about actually fundamentally making sure your business works well. There was a question with a gentleman in the blue shirt.
Hi, it's Ian Williamson from the Arts Council. Thank you for the panel for that, it was very interesting. My question is to the panel, ask you to think back over the 2 capital projects that you've undergone and looking back on them, given that you're undergoing capital projects and given that in different ways you tried to make sustainability as central to them as you possibly could. Looking back, what do you think were the drivers that made sustainability as prioritised as it could be? And looking back, what do you think you could have done better, or you would like to do better if you were in a similar position in the future?
Who'd like to start?
In our case, it's fundamentally about keeping costs down. So running costs of the building, the artists' energy bills going forward, making it a long-term sustainable, financially sustainable proposition, as well as
And it's also about doing the right thing.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, that's there's a morality about this, isn't there? That we've all got to do the right thing.
And I think as an organisation, if you have a leadership that values sustainability and values it within the organisation, has an active sustainability committee, for example, or a green team where people are encouraged to be involved. One of the reasons that we are investing in new stage lighting, where there's a lot of people who are quite resistant to do that, is because a lot of our team are very, very engaged with it. and even set up a symposium on stage and invited designers in and got the manufacturers in to do a shoot out of different lights to show them that actually it is good and the quality of light is good and you're not losing anything by switching from tungsten. So it's having an engaged workforce, I think, and that comes from leadership, but also I think we're very lucky that working in the arts you do get lots of young, very enthusiastic people who bring things to the organisation. I think we need to identify that and maximise it wherever we can.
It is an issue that people have to be able to afford to think in an environmentally sustainable way. And for a lot of people, price is the first consideration. It's sometimes a luxury to be able to think beyond that.
So
the
did you,
reality.
in the works that you were doing, did you calculate the kind of payback times in terms of the investments that you were making?
Mm-hmm.
Did you have a good understanding of how long it would take to recoup those capital investment costs?
Yeah, instantly.
And what sort of time periods?
So the electricity, for instance, the year before we used 51,000 kilowatt hours of electricity. The year after 32,000. Wow. Having said that, we've introduced a gas central heating system and we don't have bills yet, so I can't give you information.
Well, fingers crossed with all that
But
insulation.
this is a funny story. There wasn't enough electricity in the neighbourhood, so this was late in the day. They were going to charge us 80 grand to build a new substation within our own building, so we'd lose studios. So we said, hang on a minute, we could put gas central heating throughout the building for less money than that. So be flexible and creative as you go on with the project.
More questions?
It's actually really a comment. We've been doing a lot more work, particularly in the last few years, looking at what kind of investment projects are happening, and we've brought together some fantastic examples and case studies, and we're linking in particular with the Arts Council to kind of see what we're learning from that. I think one thing now, we've seen really exciting projects. We've heard about some of them today, and what's really important is to start to understand the combined impact and how all of this investment and the work of the arts and culture sector, what impact is it having in terms of emission reductions. We have the fantastic results from Sadler's of 13% emission reduction. We are doing some work now on energy audits to look at the impact of individual capital investments. And I think it's really important that we see, what is the impact of this investment in environmental terms, and we can look at that in financial terms and cost-saving terms also. In terms of carbon reduction and energy use reductions, but I think what's interesting also is to look at the broader environmental impacts as well. It's really important to think about emissions and money, but also what has the impact been of those projects. And I think the really successful projects that we've seen are very much linked to the artistic vision, accessibility, what it is you need to achieve as a dance venue. So I just really wanted to add that, and I think that's something that we're really looking at and bringing together all of your fantastic examples to try and tell that story in a combined way, which is shared with the sector so people can learn from your fantastic experience. So that wasn't a question, but
it's a good statement. Thank you very much. Any other questions or observations that you want to make? Is there anything you want to ask based on what you're trying to do in your own organisations? Anything that's resonated with you want to know more about? Okay, I'll come to you in a moment.
I'm Nanda from the Bhavan Indian Cultural Center. Recently, thanks to Arts Council, we have fitted our stage with the black lino for dance and other activities. On our stage, we have music concerts, dance, which is Indian dance, barefoot dance, and also drama activities. All the time, movement of the tables, stages, etc. will take place all the time. We do not know how to keep that clean and free from scratches, etc. Recently, I spent a lot of money on that. Is there any ideas that you could give?
Yes, should I talk to you about that afterwards, about maintenance of floors? I can definitely talk to you about that.
Great, so if you two want to have a conversation afterwards, absolutely, that would be perfect.
Yeah.
Great, that's exactly what the kind of networking is for. There was a question here in the front row.
Hi, Caroline Pitts, I'm a consultant.
And one of the challenges I often have is around getting hold of the data to prove how much something is going to save before we've actually put it into place. And you mentioned sub-metering being incorporated as part of your capital project. In the absence of sub-metering, in advance, for a building like this one, where you're trying to isolate different uses and say this is how much something will save, did you come across any good tips or tricks to be able to help make the case in a robust way?
We did at the start of the when we were deciding what to target, we asked Julie's Bicycle to do a sort of energy audit, and there was an awful lot of painful calculation of what everything, of how much energy every single thing was using, and so we used that to target, you know, where we were going to spend the money. And we also did things about the payback periods. So that actually the payback period, the if you like, the most efficient one for that was the stage door, which sort of paid for itself in 2 years. Whereas, you know, other things will take much longer. But we did do quite a lot of work at the beginning of the process to inform the application and the choices that we made about what we were going to do.
It's probably worth saying that so as part of the Fit for Future network there is an energy managers group, and that group spend a lot of time supporting each other in terms of both how to monitor your energy but also how to report on it. And for organisations of a certain size, most buildings over a certain size will have a building management system, a BMS, installed in it. One of our award winners in Ashton is a company called Demand Logic. They have a great bit of cloud platform computing that sucks data out of the BMS, analyses it, pushes it back down to the energy managers, and really helps you to understand the mechanical failures in your building as well as the kind of energy issues. So there's lots of advice out there. But one of the things we found in the network in our latest members survey, only one third of our network members weren't monitoring energy use. Well, if you're not monitoring energy use, you can't track your progress, you can't work out your returns on investment. It's really important stuff. That baseline understanding data has to be in place first. I don't know if you guys would agree.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we've got a building management system which reports back to us all the time, and it flags up anything out of the ordinary. So the building services manager came to me a day before yesterday, I think, and he came up with the graph and he said there's a really big spike on stage between 12 and 4, and I don't know why that happened. And we can start to identify those and drill those down a little bit more. We can actually look at different shows as well and work out the more energy efficient shows and the ones that use vast amounts of energy. So yeah, it's interesting. I don't think it's going to have an impact on the programming.
But don't you think that's quite exciting though? I mean, yeah. I'm a bit of a geek, I admit, but actually seeing that and kind of working out what's causing it and trying to solve it, it's quite an interesting part of working life.
Yeah, and I mean, right down to the point where we say, look, there was the lights on in that studio between midnight and 4, and they shouldn't have been on. That meant somebody didn't do their rounds. That meant, you know, it's not ratting on people. It's just, you know, it's detailed monitoring. It's marginal gains.
Any more questions? There's a question. I'm just going to go for a question behind you first of all, as you've spoken already.
I've actually got a question for Sarah specifically. Sorry, my name is Cara, I work for Julie's Bicycle. And my question was, I know that you sort of present yourself as a sustainable architectural practice as well. Do you find that clients come with you with sort of that vision in mind, or do they come to you sort of with a much broader idea in terms of looking for creativity? And sort of how do you then work with particularly the cultural organisations that you work with and sort of developing and co-developing that purpose and vision for the projects that you work on?
Okay, I think I heard all of that. I think that's a really good question, because I think one of the issues around all of these things is this world is very, very complicated, and I mean, sustainability, obviously, it goes across a whole range of issues which are about, you know, business plans and about the social life of a place and the longevity and resilience of it, as well as, obviously, the kind of physical fabric and its systems and all of those things. And the job of the architect is to try and sort of bring all those together and to try and sort of balance competing issues in a way. Money's always tight, so, you know, in whatever project you do, the budget is never going to stretch through absolutely everything you might want. And I think the key is to try and focus on what are the really key drivers behind any project. One of the things that we found as architects is that people's you know, understanding of sustainability will vary massively. And I think one of the, and it's also an area that's changing very fast. So 10 years ago, everybody was interested in BREEAM, and you're getting a tick box through the BREEAM process. And actually, that was a sort of badge that you wore on your T-shirt without people really understanding what that necessarily meant. And I'm quite glad in some ways that that sort of disappeared from the frame, but it's now a bit of a free-for-all, and it's up to people to kind of define what it is that they mean by sustainability within the context of what they're trying to do. That's a much harder challenge in many ways for people, and I think it does imply that you really need to do a lot of self-examination. You need to get the right team on board who's prepared to have that conversation with you and not bully you down a route where it's highly, highly technicised. Having said all that, I actually am quite a believer in getting the data, because the data actually gives you a quick handle. Well, it might not be that quick, but depending on the number crunching, but I mean, it'll give you a very sort of clear handle on how your energy use is working. And I think that, you know, one of the big drivers of climate change at the moment is we must reduce the amount of dependency that we have on oil-based energy systems. And so that is something to really take notice of, and there is quite a lot of products coming on the market which help you to do that. But I think everybody's discipline has a kind of custom and practice associated with it, you know, like flying machines or whatever it is if you're in the theatre, which actually pose you with very specific technical problems. In our world, we often sit down with a client at a really early stage and talk to them about, you know, what are your aspirations and actually what are your capabilities to run a building that might have a very complicated building management system. If they don't have that capability, it's absolutely pointless putting that in, because they won't be able to use it, and all that will happen is they'll end up using more energy in the building than they did at the beginning. And there have been lots of studies of school buildings where, in a race to get the highest technology, low energy building, the new buildings are using much more energy than even a 19th century board school. So you've got to ask, that's a problem. You know, how are we going to solve that? And actually, I think one of the things is that actually you've got to understand that you've got to keep it simple. And sophisticated technology can only be relevant where people are capable of using it, who have the training to use it, who have the longitudinal understanding to crunch the numbers, and can pass it on to whoever replaces them when they move on to their next job. You know, it's the sort of soft, sort of social things and staffing issues which eventually cause a lot of high technological solutions to unravel. And if you want a really robust and resilient long-term solution, you've got to understand how the organisation ticks and who is capable of doing what to make it work. So that was a very long-winded, rather rambling.
I think one of the observations we've seen through the Fit for Future network is if you don't take staff and volunteers with you in this process, they will not deliberately but undermine any of your efforts in order to save energy. So to give you a very quick example, one of our award-winning programmes through Ashton is called the TLC programme. It's set up in originally Barts Hospital. It's now spreading across many NHS trusts in the UK. And their premise is to work with clinical and non-clinical staff to save energy. But they don't do it by talking about climate change. They don't do it by talking about cost. They've linked energy saving to patient care. So in a hospital, by closing doors and turning off lights, for example, you improve sleep of patients, and therefore you free up beds more quickly. You reduce infection control issues in hospitals by closing doors and turning things off. It's making about 10% saving on energy, but actually what it's doing is saving the hospital a lot of money, because it's also improving patient care. And for the clinicians and the staff in the hospital, it kind of sings to what they believe in, which is patient care. So actually, by thinking about things slightly differently and matching staff members and volunteers' individual motivations to energy saving, you can do something which is a little bit more interesting. And I guess I have a question for you guys from Sadler's Wells. So two questions. One is, how do you take staff with you? And the other one is, do you do anything in terms of educating the audiences based on the work that you've been doing to refurbish your theatre?
Yes, we've got a web page, but I think we're going to revisit that shortly, actually, and partly because of forums like this as well. so you can pick up new ideas. It's never too late to learn and to change and to do new things. And we do have an engaged staff. We do have quite a young, dynamic, artistic staff who are engaged with these things, which is great. And I mentioned earlier, you can take a lot from that as well as an organisation. You can learn a lot from it. But in terms of outward communication, we also do a lot of work in the community with our education team. We have a hip-hop team called Breaking Convention, so there's a lot of work that we do outside of the organisation as well, and regionally, and that's something that we can assist and spread with and start using, getting that message out a little bit more. Integrating it into part of our normal work is, I think, one of the key things that we should do in the future. Sustainability should be part of what you do. Health and safety should be part of everything you do. It shouldn't be a little separate committee that deals with it, and it should be part of everybody's job.
Can I add, we have a schools programme we run called People Power, which is now in its 6th year, and it's engaging secondary pupils in STEM subjects through artist-led commissions. And the first one we did was about eco-fuels. So they grew sunflowers, and then they made biofuel, and then they designed boats powered with biofuel. And so yeah, it's embedded in our learning programmes as well.
At Ashton, we have a big schools programme called Less CO2, which has a big cluster in London. So actually, I know you and I should have a conversation, because I think there's some joined up thinking to be done there. We've got time just for one or two more questions. There's one right at the back over there. I'm sorry, I can't see you for the lights.
Just for the last stream,
Thanks. Steve Curtis, Contact Theatre. I had a question for the Standards Wells team, which was that your refurbishment, as I understand it, was roughly £7 million, of which roughly £4 million was funding from Arts Council. And as I understand it, it was a refurbishment rather than a building development. You were expanding the property in that sense. In terms of raising that other £3 million, which obviously is a substantial task, was it the sustainability factor that you were able to draw on to encourage investment in the project? Or was there any other angle you were able to use?
I think that the sustainability factor was definitely a component, but it was also about building resilience. So the fact that changing the ticketing system meant that we could raise more money, basically, through ticket sales, through fundraising, and being more efficient about how we did that. So for one of our funders, that was the compelling thing, that we were doing something that was going to mean that we would, be more resilient in the future. And certainly for some trusts, the sustainability part of it was a big factor.
It was important. But then also think about what you do as an organisation that's unique, whether it's supporting artists or whether it's producing dance. People find that really engaging, and the fundraiser that worked on this for us was always coming to us as technicians going, I'm going to put this together in a little package, can you explain this to me in a very sexy way because I can sell it better. And you've got to remember that I think what we do as artistic organisations is very exciting to many people, and it's about how you sell that and how you sell that vision.
I mean, I think with a refurbishment, obviously, it's not as exciting as a new build. So, trying to get someone to
buy washing machines,
or air handling units, has
new pianos. They like new pianos.
So we had to think carefully about which parts of the project were the more compelling.
Yeah, air handling units. No, there was no takers for air handling units.
No. Or boilers.
Or boilers.
No.
So I think I'm going to pause us there. We're going to coffee in just a few moments. But first of all, just to say thank you so much for our panel. So to Sarah, Anna, Emma and Britannia, some really interesting insights. So thank you very much, guys. Just before you go for coffee, I was just reminded of a conversation around LED light bulbs, Emma, that you were talking about. So I did lots of work in the National Trust looking at replacing LED light bulbs. Took a lot of work to get the colour temperatures right, the rendering right, and in fact the National Trust ended up commissioning a whole new series of light bulbs in order to get it right. When I used to go and visit houses, one of the things that house managers always complained about is that they have endless number of chandeliers, and their staff spent a lot of time every day with ladders replacing individual tungsten light bulbs. So there was a lot of comedy about this, and the next time I went to visit Plas Newydd in Wales, they said to me, we've got a great joke for you, do you want to hear it? And I was saying, okay.
I said, how many National Trust people does it take to change a light bulb? They said, none. Not one's gone for 2 years, and fell about with laughter. So there are other upsides to changing light bulbs other than just the light themselves. Thank you all very much. I think our guests are with us for coffee. Are you staying for coffee? So if you've got individual questions, will you be happy to take those questions?
Yeah,
if
sure.
people would like to do so. Thank you very much again. Thank you to you. Coffee served. If you haven't already signed up for your next workshop, could you please do that before 3:15? Thank you all very much.
Just to give them a
Welcome everybody to the next session of the day. This one is called People and Systems, and it's really about how people and systems work together optimally. And I'm sure a lot of you will have examples of where they might not be working so well. And so we're going to explore with our three fantastic panellists their experiences of bringing those two together. We've got presentations followed by a panel discussion Q&A as per, and we've got three people with us. We've got Wayne Hitchings, who's Energy and Sustainability Manager for the Natural History Museum, which is obviously an extraordinary building which has got a huge both heritage value but also has its own very unique idiosyncrasies. Then we've got Keith Jones, who some of you will have already heard, who's done some fantastic work within the context of the National Trust, environmental practice advisor, but he's also the co-founder of the Fit for the Future network. And finally, we've got Catherine Bottrell, who has been working with Julie's Bicycle for 10 years and has brought a great deal of technical as well as scientific expertise into all the work that we do. And we're going to kick off with, we're going to start with Wayne, then Keith, and then Catherine, unless you've got to whiz off, Keith.
No, I'm okay.
Is that all right?
Yeah, fine.
So without further ado, let's just push off into that.
Yeah.
Is it that blasted clicker
No,
again?
it doesn't appear to be me first.
Let's try.
Unless it's gone the wrong way. You're right. Second. Is that me doing that or somebody else?
This is daft.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Right. Yes, that looks a bit more like it. Hi. I'm Wayne, Energy and Sustainability Manager at the Natural History Museum, and I guess the title that I put together is there, but the synopsis for this session was about people and technology, and I'll try and cover that throughout my session and the couple of main projects that we're focusing on right now that definitely incorporate both of those things. So a bit of content, a quick introduction to the Natural History Museum. Hopefully most of you would know a bit about us already. Some of the key challenges that we face with respect to energy and sustainability, some of our successful projects, and then a little bit about how we funded those or funding streams that we might tap into, and then our current projects and at the end strategy and engagement. Interesting that you refer to it as the building at South Ken. I think a lot of people would associate with that, but actually the Natural History Museum has 3 different sites, the closest one to here of course and the most famous one at South Kensington, also a smaller museum in Tring in Hertfordshire and a very large storage facility elsewhere in London. And at South Kensington site we actually have 8 buildings. Most of them are hidden behind the very pretty looking one that you see in the photo there, and we have a very wide-ranging stock. The Waterhouse building opened in 1881. It's Grade 1 listed, which makes it very challenging when you think about energy management. We have a total of 80 million specimens, just over 5 million visitors a year, and some world-leading research that goes on. And I think we're trying to promote that a bit more because it hasn't always been that clear to people that we're not just a museum for you to come and see things, but there's actually a lot of world-class research that goes on. And that, again, brings its own challenges when you think about sustainability and energy, and I'll cover that a bit more. So our main challenges are, with respect to sustainability, I've touched on it already, but a diverse building stock. So we have Grade 1 listed buildings built in the 1880s, we have 60s tower blocks, we have buildings that were built in 2009, and each of those brings about its own unique challenge, really, and I'm sure that that's quite common across the estates that you all manage. Coupled with that are a very diverse range of stakeholders. You have the different scientists, life sciences and earth sciences, we've got retail and front of house, we've got events people, we've got finance people, as everybody would have, catering, and then of course all of our visitors and the senior management. So trying to engage with all of those and promote sustainability throughout an entire organisation is a really difficult challenge, and I'll talk about the importance of a strategy later on, how I think that is what we really need to focus on and able to begin to change the culture of the museum. Very energy intensive activities, so when you're looking after collections and there are parameters around relative humidity and heat, or temperature I should say, if they're quite narrow bands, they're very energy intensive to maintain those conditions, and they vary depending on what the actual artifact or specimen is, but the energy use to maintain those cooling and heating systems and humidity systems is very strong, and so you have to balance that against, well, it's got to do what it's meant to do. Our job is to protect the national collection, but making it as sustainable as we can in the meantime. We have a lot of aging infrastructure across our site that, again, is a big challenge for us, and we try to renew it as we're going along, but we don't have a massive pot of money that we can just throw huge sums at it. So I think it's been referred to a lot of the time already today that you just keep hammering away at it, and you keep chopping away, and you hopefully over time you can improve through your maintenance plan. Funding is a challenge for us because I guess most of you that are ultimately government funded have probably been seeing the same as us, that you're seeing that funding reduce over the last few years. So to make up for it, to sustain what you've got already, you have to find alternative funding sources. So in terms of energy, I think you have a session later about some funding sources, so I won't talk about that. But one of the key points of a strategy, I think, is how it can relate to the core objectives of the organisation itself. One of our core objectives at the moment is certainly income generation and funding for our research programs, and where sustainability can support those. And I certainly, through speaking to some of our scientists that are applying for research grants, more and more common now is the sustainability section within those research applications. So, we can really start to impact and get ourselves known and raise the appearance of sustainability by helping people to achieve the core objectives of the organisation. We're open, again, very energy intensive is the fact that we're open 364 days a year. This also brings about the challenge of when you're implementing projects, particularly if you need electrical shutdowns and things like that, where if you're open that much, and you might automatically think, well, you shut at 6, therefore you've got the whole evening, but we have a vast number of events. We have research, one piece of research or sequencing or something might last several weeks in one go, so you can't just shut power off whenever you want. So that is quite a challenge, having such little time to do what we want to do. And up until now, in terms of sustainability, we've lacked a little bit of direction on stating what it is that we're actually trying to achieve and having that strategy that pulls everything together. We've done lots of very good ad hoc projects, and I think my next slide is talking about some of those. About 10 years, it was 10 years ago, this year is the 10-year anniversary of the installation of our energy centre, where we have a tri-generation energy centre. So we have a 1.8 megawatt CHP that generates electricity. We reuse the heat. Instead of dumping it, we reuse it to heat space and water. And also in the summer, you can put that heat through an absorption chiller to create cooling, and we have a huge cooling demand across our sites, much more efficient than taking the electricity from the grid. And that saves us the whole network saves about £1 million a year. It doesn't just supply the Natural History Museum, the heat is also supplied to the V&A down the road from us, so it's a good collaborative project. Also, for 10 years now, we've had an ISO 14001 accredited environmental management system. This is, which covers the entire business. I should add that. That's, I think, is a huge achievement for the museum to have done that, to have the scope of the entire museum. And when you think about all the different supply chains and everything we've got, is really very impressive. We're currently working towards transitioning to the new 2015 standard, which will be a big challenge for us. But this is underpinning a lot of our values with sustainable measures and what we're trying to achieve. And it's important, I think, to note that we've heard a lot about energy and carbon throughout, particularly the last session that I sat through in here. But sustainability, of course, covers a whole wider range of things than that. And so as part of our strategy, we're trying to incorporate procurement and travel and transport and water and waste and biodiversity and health and well-being. So it's a real breadth of aspects that we're trying to cover, and our environmental management system underpins that and helps us to drive it throughout the whole museum and all those range of stakeholders. And very quickly, some other projects that we've done, lots of LED lighting that people have talked about today. It's a bit of a no-brainer these days, I think, just very good paybacks. Some water efficiency projects in washrooms and with showers, and some low-loss transformers which have saved us some electricity. Our funding partly has come in-house. The Energy Centre and the LED project and the low-loss transformer project were brought in through two different ESCO contracts, so energy service contracts, where the museum doesn't have that kind of capital itself, so has got into a partnership with a 15-year contract with a company that has bought that equipment, installed it and maintains it for us. And then we pay them sort of service charge every month, and they run the Energy Centre for us, which has been very successful. And then there are alternative ways to fund projects through external sources, which is the next session, so I won't cover that here. So the two main projects that we're looking at right now, when we talk about energy is the first one, and then wider sustainability the second one. Metering being the first one, because if you can't sort of measure what you're consuming, it's very difficult to manage it in the first place. So we've installed 350 electricity sub-meters across the South Kensington site, and we will use that to monitor progress, to reset baselines because the older data was not based on some solid data, and use it to target inefficiencies. This will support our BMS and support our BMS contractor in identifying those areas that we can be more efficient. It will also enable us to monitor the savings that we think we've been getting from these other projects. But it goes much further than that, because we will be able to display it on screens around the site. We'll be able to have web logins. So we want to use it as an educational tool for our visitors, to tell them what we're doing, but also how they can help us, and also to all of our staff. And our staff have actually been quite proactive in coming to us for data, particularly some of the research scientists that are after it for their funding applications, but also where we change our galleries quite often. We have gallery spaces that we change every few months and refresh content and change it. Yeah, but we don't know too much about how much that energy that consumes, and they want to build that within the business cases. So it's going to be a huge tool for us. But the strategy really is trying to tie it all together. We've had the Energy Centre, the ISO 14001 and the metering, but we're not clear about, so far, about what we're actually trying to achieve. So our strategy goals are, what does a sustainable museum look like? What does a sustainable museum cover? And all those aspects of that sustainability wheel that I mentioned earlier, and the different areas that we would cover. And how do we link that to our core objectives so that we can engage with all of our staff across a huge organisation with very different drivers for each of them. And I think that is the end. So yeah, we've, as I've just gone through that slide, supporting our ISO 14001 system is obviously another key objective of that. That is a Stegosaurus. Her name is Sophie. Please come down and see her. And I think questions are later, actually, aren't they?
Yeah, they are.
Okay.
That's fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Straight through on to Keith.
I haven't done a PowerPoint, not that I'm lazy, but I'm lazy. I've been asked to present around the people side, where quite often people are the victims of other people's good ideas, where people use the word sustainability willy-nilly, really, as an organisation. We're 14,001, we've got 29,000 buildings, structures that we look after, we have golf courses, hotel groups and all sorts of stuff. But are we more environmentally friendly? Still not sure. We've been looking at moving away from ISO, looking at one planet approaches. In Wales now we've adopted legislation around future generations, which has measures and stuff in it. So we're in a point at the moment where we're moving away from compliance into impact aspect, because a lot of ISO is compliance driven. Have you got a file on? Can you prove that? Can you show me where? Whereas, which is really good if your organisation's just starting down the journey, because you know that Big Brother's looking over your shoulder, that somebody's going to come in to check that the stuff you're saying publicly is actually what's happening in the organisation. But if I'm going back to the tech side, the projects, the improvement side, this is the equivalent of sitting in Alcoholics Anonymous and saying, I'm a bad client. Because quite often we go out, we ask for stuff we probably don't need, we get the thing we don't want, and then we say we wanted something different, but we didn't know what it was until we get the thing that we didn't want, if that makes sense, sorry. And then we blame the tech. All too often, it always goes back to the tech. I've been on many project management courses, and I've got many qualifications in project management, but the first course I ever went on, a scenario was set where if you have a ship and it's crossing the ocean, who sets the speed of that ship? And it's the owner, it's the engineer, it's the guy that shovels the coal. No, it's the designer. Because if you haven't designed that thing to go a certain speed, no matter what you do, it'll never go more than that speed. And all too often, the end user isn't involved in the design phase of it. You end up with a thing that you don't understand, with management actions that you didn't know you were signing up to when somebody said you need this red box that burns stuff or turns round and round or does a certain action. Oh, by the way, you've also signed up to an awful lot more management time, because we know you've got plenty of time on your hands to do whatever actions it takes. We build the Starship Enterprise, we give ourselves awards, and then we hand it over to the cleaner, and best of luck to them. Hope you cope with all the flashing lights. I'm not sure what the ones on the left do, but I'm off. That's my role, usually. We have hundreds and hundreds of heat pumps, biomass, PV, solar thermal, hydros in place now. We've learned a lot of what not good looks like, or not needed looks like. We have BMS systems that basically we handed over blank checks to consultants. I don't know what I want it to do, but I know I want a BMS system. It's $250,000, fine. In fact, it obviously is, because you've designed it for me. So about 5 years ago, under Chatham House rules, we asked Arup to come in to criticise us as an organisation. Do we know what we're asking for as an organisation? Where do you see the weaknesses of us, of a typical client, in terms of projects, in terms of improvement, in terms of I've got an opportunity and a challenge and I wish to get benefit out of it, whatever that benefit is. Are we engaging in the right phase? Are we bringing the right team forward? All sorts of stuff. And it was very, very insightful. We actually invited them back to then run a training course on how to become a better client for consultants, because it's easy blaming the consultant, but they don't understand your business. Quite often, you don't understand the thing that they do, and then there's this impasse in the middle. They're having to second guess what you want, so it's overvalued, over-designed, over-technical, because they're trying to cover everything that you might possibly want that you don't know that you need aspects. The client involvement, or the end user, is now critical in the National Trust. We've developed something called the Project Management Framework, which is really nice and really sexy and follows Association of Project Management rules and all sorts of other aspects. But the client is tasked with something critical, which is the client brief. What do you want? What's the problem? What's the opportunity? Don't ask the consultant to write it, because they don't know your business. If they did, they'd be doing your job aspect. So everything now hangs on the client brief. What's the problem, or what's the opportunity I'm dealing with? I've been blaming a lot on the client. I'd like to now move it over to the consultancy aspect of it. Consultants need to be braver in addressing the basics of what the client's asking for. Not calling them stupid, but actually saying, are you sure you want this? Because if you do that, this is the implications to your business. Oh, I didn't realize that because I've never done one of these before as a client, but the consultant has. And coming back to the client brief all of the time. And if it needs changing it, but realize there's cost implication, time implication, management implication of evolving that aspect. I'm now converted and a really big fan of something that our accountants don't like, which are soft landings, as they're called, which is, can you put money aside for something that we don't know that might happen, because by the time we've finished it, it might not be exactly what you want, but we can evolve as we taper down towards a full handover. Whereas at the moment, we commission, everybody runs away, we'll come back 6 months later, are you happy? You haven't got any money for that because we've closed the project. The project's closed, it's now operational because it did the thing that you wanted to do at 3:30 on a Thursday 6 months ago. But now that the business is evolving and you understand the kit, the management process, the room, the whatever it is, you'd like to adapt it so that it can just do this and just do that. We've had a lot of these where I wish the BMS system did this and talked to that, because that would be really handy information. Well, why don't you do it? Well, I haven't got the budget to do that, but it'll save me time, it'll save me money, it'll save me hassle for doing it. Well, why didn't you say it right at the beginning? Well, I didn't know that thing did that action right at the beginning. The other aspect, I like you probably know it, the Einstein quote, that if you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it yourself. We go too much into technobabble, green bling, and it's all been mentioned before. Whereas we were doing insulation in all of the mansions in Wales, and we were asking, right, what's the primary objective with here? We want to save heat. Right, we've got rock wool. Oh, I don't want that. Why? Well, I don't know. I don't think it's good. Right, let's revisit what your primary objective is. Do you want to enhance skills? Do you want to use natural fibre? Do you want this? Do you want that? Do you want this? Well, I'm not sure. Fine. Let's go right back to the beginning. How much energy are you wasting? How much? So it's getting back to the really, really, really basic aspect of how you tackle this challenge or opportunity, as we call it. If I wind back 8 years ago, we did a review of 230 heating systems that we had that had been installed in the previous 10 years. 100% of them weren't modulating higher than 50%, which means that they were double the size that they needed to be. Because the consultant wasn't getting the data from the client, because the client didn't know, all they had was a cash bottom line. I use 45,000 quid. Well, is that the amount you've got in the tank? Is it efficient? How good is your boiler running? So, and then, professional indemnity, I'll add 20% onto it. And the smaller we went, the bigger the systems got, because obviously Jewsons were giving away a free drill if you went for a bigger boiler for that office in the middle of somewhere on it. So we were getting boilers that were corroding, we were getting flue gas condensation, we were getting a lot of problems because we'd oversized it. But to me, it wasn't the consultant or the developers. We couldn't blame them because we didn't know what we were asking for to start with. Our maintenance brief was really simple. Make sure it doesn't break. Do you want efficiency? Yeah, that'd be nice. But it can't break on a bank holiday because we'll have to give a lot of money back. Yeah, do you want these features? No, I haven't got the budget for that. Yeah, but it's now broken. You're losing money because you've oversized it. And the whole lot's rotted out in the back end of the boiler. So back to becoming a much better client. We're sending a lot of people out to see stuff that doesn't work or does work. Because when it doesn't work, you actually do quite a bit more studying of why it doesn't work. When it does work, you assume, oh yeah, it said that on the box, and it's already doing that bit. So I'll finish up with something that I call Paul's brush, which is we built a very large hydro on the side of Snowdon. And then we've had a weir that needed cleaning. It's had a really flash screen on it. And then we had 3 engineers and a health and safety engineer in looking at how on earth do we clean this and maintain safety. We were going to fall arrest and steel cables and training and stuff. And then Paul, my colleague, said, well, why don't you just buy a longer handle for the brush? Oh yeah, we forgot about keeping it simple and keeping it real aspect. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Keith. We should have a conversation about generators in festivals. We have exactly the same issue about over-specified generators and the supply chain tensions around selling fuel and what the festivals actually need. So very similar, and I've experienced. And finally, Catherine Bottrell, who works for Julie's Bicycle. Off you go.
Great. Oh, thank you. I wanted to start by just reframing us back at the Paris Agreement. And that 2 degrees has come about because the grassroots have given the space for the politicians to set that global ambition. And now the transformation will again come from the grassroots, because it needs, that transformation can only come about through all the actions that we take in place of our buildings. And I think the cultural sectors have such an important part to play in helping our communities go along that journey. And it can feel quite daunting of how do we move to a zero carbon sector. And hopefully I can...
Scroll down.
Scroll down.
There you go.
There. And we're prepared to help sort of set that narrative of how you might move towards the zero carbon. Our Fit for the Future guide has the sort of the energy management strategy that Wayne talked about as being really important, knowing where you're trying to get to and knowing what the process by which you need to work towards. And it's really important. I'm not going to sort of go to the Fit for the Future guide to look at this, but I think what's really important to understand is almost half of the transformation into low carbon comes through procedural, behavioural, and understanding your existing systems. It's that second half which is around the technologies, the equipment, and the solutions. But if you can get that first half done, then you'll be in a really strong position over the next 20, 30, 40 years to transform your organizations into low carbon. Whoops. And some great examples. So I'm going to highlight through 3 key areas that you can go into the Fit for the Future guide to delve in, as well as the many case studies and stories and organizations and people that have been in this room to date. But the key areas to focus is that core mission. So the organizations we see for it working best is when, as Sean this morning said, is when sustainability is part of that, the missions and values and the practices of your organizations. The second area that I'm going to be giving examples around is capital investment. How do you use capital investment to maximize the impact and the savings? And then the third part is this organizational processes and procedures. So how do you sort of unlock it within your organizations? So Whitworth, I think, is a wonderful example where they took the time to really understand what the purpose of this gallery, that they wanted it to be. So what is the financial sort of limitations and opportunity? What is it that the visitor experience is wanted and needed? What is the curation experience? And then the sustainability. So when they took time to really talk and unpack that with all those different groups before they started embarking on what is now a truly inspirational building and demonstrates and role models what low carbon looks like. The second is the Space Studios. This is a creative space where artists are creating work, but it wasn't fit for purpose. It wasn't working. They weren't able to reach that mission. So again, taking the time to really unlock for what does this space really need to do, and how do we then embrace the sustainability agenda into that? And I think what they now have is a space that creates the environment that art and the creators can really do their best work in.
Sorry.
So the next area which I wanted to really highlight is capital investment. Sometimes people can jump into, and I'm sure many of you in the room are already undertaking or thinking about capital investment projects, but before embarking on those projects, it's really good to think about the assessment criteria, like how are you going to decide what is the right capital investment for your organisation, what sorts of funding sources do you need, what are the requirements of that funder. And the Everyman Theatre, of which Steve Tompkinson talked about this morning, they undertook an assessment criteria to really look at how do they decide what technologies and options would be the best and suited. And during the course of that project, the other thing to know is there's a lot of innovation happening out there, especially as the agenda around climate change becomes more important. So these projects can take 5 years, and during that time, new technology comes in. So it's almost in that building process, you need to allow for that. And this happened for the Everyman Theatre. Some of the technologies that were not workable, cost prohibitive at the beginning when they were scoping became viable towards the end. Nottingham Playhouse is an organisation that we've been working with under the Arts Council programme, and again they were partnered with a university to really understand what feasibility study, to understand what technologies, before they launched into undertaking lots of building works, they assessed and worked with that university partnership to see what options would be most viable. And this project, we've worked with the Arts Council to assess, after this first phase of capital work, where's it got to, and it's achieved a 30% savings. And now what they're looking towards is, where do we go next with this? There's an appetite, there's an ambition, and now they can really build it an ongoing energy management strategy. But all the way along in their capital investment, they were looking at what makes sense to do. The Herbert Gallery and Museum in Coventry is another really interesting example of an organisation that we've been working under the Arts Council programme, and they've undertaken a large phase of work to extend the exhibition space and open up the galleries. But interestingly, they're also a storage collection for the city, so they've got a really tight requirements for space conditioning for their storage, and then open, free-flowing galleries, very dynamic. And so with the analysis and work that we've been doing with them, is a recommendation around data analysis, really, as Wayne was talking about, really understand your energy systems, get the right metering in, understand that BMS machine so you can really optimize it, and then from there scope out what is the most sensible next phase of capital development work, because on this site there's ambitions for further extension of the building, but making sure that their existing systems are fit for purpose before they continue on that journey. But at the heart of all this is always about people. Energy is we describe it as this energy system, but it's really driven by the key people within your organization and externally in your organization that can support you getting to hopefully this zero carbon performing sector and buildings. And the key in the Home Manchester, as many of you might know, has been the amalgamation of two arts centre. It's a new building, major centre, and Debbie, the building manager there, has worked tirelessly to ensure that the design specifications set out in the commissioning of that building is really delivering, and ensuring that she can work with the service providers and that they have actually implemented it as expected. And for Debbie, it's been really key. She's had the support internally, because some of this can be difficult conversations, because things in reality don't look as pretty as they did on the papers. Issues come about, so you want to make sure that you're working internally with your teams and then your service providers to make sure that you get that best outcome. And as Debbie, she wasn't able to join us today, said, but as a message to all of you on taking this, just don't give up, keep going on it, and work as best you can with those partners and try and strengthen them, because you will need to use them over and over again. And Sadler's Wells, which has also undertaken a major investment program and really become, one of the world's leading dance organizations, but sustainability has become really ingrained and embedded in how they approach that building and creating a vibrant artistic space that welcomes the local community and artists and internationally renowned work. And I think the example there of why it's been really successful is there's really good cross-departmental facilitation and discussion about how the building is performing and what the requirements of the building are, and using the green team to catalyze that and gathering the data. They've also installed a whole bunch of sub-metering data to understand, what is drawing energy in the building and how do we optimize that. But obviously if you're the facilities manager, you can't just do it on your own. You need full buy-in and cooperation with your colleagues. And Sadler's Wells is really pushing forward with that. And under the Arts Council programme, we were able to do a post-evaluation survey to show how much that they were saving as they were hoping to under their capital investment. And I just wanted to leave you with this the Birmingham MAC has undertaken a long journey with embedding sustainability and the values in their organisation and doing all that good housekeeping and then installing the photovoltaics and the metering and getting a green team. And they have done our Creative Green Scheme, and what came out of that green scheme is that they hadn't been telling anybody what they'd been doing. So this summer they opened up and hosted an eco festival to bring and welcome the local community to learn about what they're doing as an organisation, and also the partners that they work with, Birmingham Cycle Revolution, and they work with the Wildlife Trust. And so it's again becoming a community hub of activity and again modelling that sustainability, which is how we will move to a zero carbon creative sector.
Thank you. Okay, so we've got, thank you both of you very much, and thank you, Keith. We've got a quarter of an hour. I think obviously what we've looked at is combining the technicals, which is from building management systems to longer brushes, with the ongoing cultures in which we're landing these technologies. And just a sort of a big shout out to Soft Landings, which is a really, really interesting system which puts people right at the centre of any sort of design principles and any practice that follows. Can I just throw this out to the audience to ask for if there are any immediate questions or any experiences of this sometimes conflicting but sometimes really beautifully organic process that happens by combining these two areas. Does anybody want to ask a question or share a story? Neil.
Yeah, I was really struck by the people side of this, the audience side of this. This morning was a very powerful message about people working together, professionals working together, making sure that people who understand the distinct bits of sustainability processes work well together. I think the point that came out of the museum is that around Britain you've got screens that the audience can look at when they're walking around. You've got the map, this last example, you've got a whole bunch of people who just got on with it and then forgot that there's an audience for this stuff. And I think the long brush example is where actually the audience might come up with a solution that none of the professionals have considered. And there's a great story about Mitsubishi where they have a suggestion box open to their employees, and one suggestion went in there to do with something to do with energy, which transformed their business. And I think that somehow engaging creatively with your audiences through a whole range of mechanisms is one of the ways to go on this path, because often Mr. and Mrs. Average, like me, will go into something, be really amazed by it, but not engaged, not leading with a question or a conundrum or something which fascinates me in terms of a solution. And I think the ways whereby we can now begin to engage that audience is one of the kind of transitional periods that we're in. How do we actually get the imperative of this, the urgency of this, the emergency into a mindset that doesn't create panic, doesn't have people leaving the planet, but does engage everybody creatively with regard to solutions?
And I think what's happened is there has been for the arts that I can speak more to is that we're not confident about the issue. Like, first of all, I think people have seen energy as just the, keeping the building running and open, and it's not being seen as a topic or an area to engage really the staff or the audiences. And I think as you reposition energy management and sustainability as part of your core missions, then it filters into everything that you do and unlocks opportunities to have a new conversation with colleagues internally that are in different departments, and then how do you take the conversation out there? And I think what we're seeing at the moment through the Julie's Bicycle Network is organisations are now ready for that. There's needed to be a period of, we've got to feel confident with this issue and understand it, because we don't want to look silly or exposed or have a failing because the kit didn't work as we wanted it. But I think now, which is really exciting, is we're moving to phase people want to go out there and talk in a kind of innovative way and really harness that creative voice in it.
Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would say that I completely agree with you that especially in this age where your opportunity to engage with people is enormous. I mentioned the live energy data on the screens, but of course that would only be one way to do it. And we have options through social media or through smartphone apps as other examples where we can engage people like we've not been able to do before, or it wasn't that long ago that you couldn't do it. So it's actually a huge opportunity for us to be able to draw people in and tell them about what we're trying to achieve and why we're trying to achieve it. And I guess museums are there to, in some ways, to educate people. And the story, particularly with the Natural History Museum, protecting the natural environment, which is including being as sustainable as you can and reducing the impacts of climate change, is key to our core business. So having those different avenues that we can go down to reach people is very key to us.
Can I just add a little bit to that, which is that there is a tendency, I think, for even now, for part of the sort of environmental rhetoric to say you need not to talk about this in a bad way. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those fashion things that you can only talk about it if you bring into it lots of happiness. And of course, it being a super wiki problem, as I said, what we're seeing at JB is that actually that we can't be too designer about this, that actually different things move different people in different ways, and that what we're seeing now is a many voiced, much more complex, much more grainy response, which is, I think, part of a movement becoming much more mature. It's not gagging any of it, and I think it all needs to be there. We need to be able to look into the eye of the storm with a bit of courage, and we also need to be able to look into the eye of the amazing opportunities that sustainability brings us and feel that it's worth doing. So there's a much richer response for that. I also think that one of the issues is that the cultural and the heritage and the arts community have never been taken seriously by wider communities of interest. So, for example, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, who, when we sent a letter around COP21 signed by about just over 300 artists and cultural leaders, they couldn't be happier to get that letter. And for me, that moment said, actually, we've come at last into a point where we're going to be taken seriously. So it's also who we speak to as a community, not thinking that actually we just need to speak to ourselves, but actually we can speak outside our immediate frames of reference and actually be really useful there. So it's about cross-sector dialogues in that context of who, how and what we communicate. We need to be a bit more ambitious ourselves, I think. Sho, did you want to say something?
Well, just sort of a bit zoom down from the brilliant point you're making. It was really just to share a few ways in which that organisations, as you're saying, are taking very different entry routes into kind of making their journey more visible and directly inviting audiences to take part in that. So Manchester Art Gallery is one example where they were really looking at their energy systems and what they could do cheaply before they made an investment. And basically they decided to, well, they did a lot of monitoring and realised that the lift was, quite a source of energy in the building, and installed a display energy monitor next to it and basically gave a cap for it every day and asked people who could obviously take the stairs, not those who couldn't, to make a choice, and they could see throughout the day how much energy was being used in the building, and suddenly it was not just an ask to people to help us keep the energy down, but also a critical point of reflection for someone making that choice to say, oh, what does it look like in my own home? Or so it's a nice way of thinking about how we can also make some of the systems in our buildings more visible, not just to help people move through them in ways that support what we're trying to do, but also to help them reflect on things that feel very tangible to them in their own lives. So yeah, it was just a small example, but really I think on the point about how we get taken seriously, I think it's also worth considering on a slightly more local level the combined impact of these kinds of initiatives. So also in Manchester, I think Simon is here from the Manchester Art Sustainability team. There's been a group of organisations collaborating together on sustainability, much in the same way we've heard about other networks doing the same here today. And the combined efforts of those both very practical means of looking at their buildings, adapting them, going through capital projects, but also directly testing how they can engage audiences with that, how they can engage artists with that, has positioned them in the city as one of the critical engagement networks for the city's climate change strategy. And now the city is working with them as one of the few partners to develop a citywide strategy with the public on what it looks like for Manchester to be a zero carbon city by 2050. So again, a really nice example of actually how much each of those small actions matter if we make them visible in terms of then being able to influence, the conversation about then what our city looks like as a sustainable city.
Is there any other questions?
Hello, I'm Simon Wales from Boston Manor. I know Keith's gone, and also you were saying as well about being able to have honest conversations and say something hasn't gone well, especially when the team has to pick up a system that someone else has designed and it's been handed over. So for example, where we work, there is one biomass, and it's not loved by the teams who have to use it and who experience its output. And now the discussion is about another biomass, and wouldn't that be a great thing? And there's all this hostility and resistance. So it's just a reflection that it is helpful to be able to come back to work and say, actually people can talk about why something has gone wrong and what we need to do to stop that. But when I was just wondering, within the Natural History Museum being such a huge organisation, about how you get buy-in from so many people with so many different views, and is there some kind of staff forum where it can all be aired and people can sort of get all their views across before something gets imposed on them?
In terms of buildings and services, I guess the FM help desk takes most of that. But no, in terms of engaging with people, I think that without that strategy that ties everything together, it's a very difficult story to tell. Because if you don't know yourself what your ultimate goal is and why you're trying to achieve that, how are you going to explain that to the different stakeholders that you've got and then engage them within it? But also what I would say, especially if you've got a wide range, is you need to learn and evolve how to be able to relate to them and what they do. Someone front of house in retail might, unless they're personally interested, they might have no interest in what the carbon emissions of the museum are. So you going to them and saying, our CO2 emissions were this last year, we want them to be that. Well, who cares if it's them? They might not be interested. So you need to find a way that relates to them and say, how can it help them? Or if they're trying to, they're trying to ultimately bring in as much money to the museum as they can through maybe selling toys or whatever, right? Where are we sourcing them from? Well, a more sustainable way for us would be to not source them from very far away, but closer together. Is that able then to reduce the costs that you're having? Or when we send exhibitions across the world in terms of transport emissions. So engaging with all of them is very challenging. Having a very clear story, a very clear strategy about what it is you're trying to achieve, why you're trying to achieve it, and how it can benefit them is the key importance to that.
And just to add on that, what we find is a quite good tool when we start working with organisations is to take a snapshot sort of survey with the staff, and it might require doing some interviews and a couple of focus groups just so that where does this issue sit for organisations, what is their frustrations, what their opportunities, so that then normally through the green teams or senior management you start unpacking that and then undertake a programme, but then go back to the staff, and get their feedback on it. So, it's really wonderful when you've worked with organisations for several years, as we've had the opportunity to, and you can see that change because you've kind of taken little snapshots as you go along with them.
Can I just add to what I said before, because there's a couple of specific examples that I think would add to the point that I've already made. So when we were creating our energy and environment policies, we created an environment group where it took key stakeholders from right across the museum, from everything from science to finance to retail to catering, brought them all together so that we created it as a group. And in that way, it wasn't something that someone said, there's a new policy, you've got to adhere to that. It was, well, this is our policy, we've built it together. That's one way that we've engaged everybody. And then right now, we're just about to start our third year of the NUS's Green Impact Scheme. I don't know if anyone else is aware of it, but you create teams across the museum or whatever your business is, and there's an online workbook, and they work through certain actions that they can take within their area that will help the whole organisation become more sustainable, and then they can win awards for doing so. And it's just quite a nice way that rather than sort of coming with a stick and saying you must do this, that and the other, it's enabling them to understand how they can do it amongst doing their normal daily work. They have a bit of fun doing it. What we find when we add that element of awards is that they can be quite competitive, and sometimes that can be an advantage as they try to do more against each other. So there are just a couple of very specific examples of how you can engage with your staff.
And I think your point about being able and confident enough to make mistakes is absolutely crucial. That what we've seen over and over again are people putting in new bits of kit, lots of sub-metering or whatever it may be, and then their energy profile actually not doing what they need it to do, what their expectations are of it doing, and feeling like they failed. And of course, there's all sorts of reasons why it might not be happening in the way that they want it to. So, but what it's doing is it's muffling people even more from talking about the complexities of building management and energy management, and how you actually marry expectations with performance and not taking it too personally. And there's two stunning examples, I will not call them out, but they're two major institutions who've done some fantastic work, and yet they are at the moment very frightened of saying what's really going on, because there's no climate in which we can do that. And I think it's really important that we are forgiving, because we won't understand how to do this unless we can see a full picture. So I think it's a really, really profound point. We haven't got much time left, but does anybody have a quick question that they'd like to ask? We've got about a minute. Or would you like to leave this very hot room and go and get a cup of tea? I think that's a yes. Thank you very much.